Marigold Blackwood's fingers danced across the dials of her professional camera. Photography had been her passion since childhood. She vividly recalled receiving her first disposable camera at age 10, excitedly capturing everything from buzzing insects to fluffy clouds, even her own feet. Now, as a professional photographer, Marigold specialized in weddings, aspiring models, and practically anyone requiring quality photographs. Recently, Marigold had invested $3,500 in a professional camera. Though expensive, she considered every dollar well spent. Her parents, however, were horrified when they discovered the cost. "You wasted $3,000 on a camera?" her mother, Eudora, had exclaimed, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "Marigold, you need to find a real job, something stable in an office with benefits." Her father, Callum, nodded in agreement. "Your cousin Temperance just got hired at that insurance company downtown. They have dental." Marigold had wanted to inform them that she earned enough money to cover their mortgage monthly, but she held her tongue. Her family had never taken her career seriously. She still lived with her parents, though this wasn't her original plan. After graduating from the local community college, Marigold had been ready for independence. Her parents, however, convinced her to stay. Eudora had lost her banking position and struggled to find employment for months. Drowning in debt, they needed Marigold's help. That was 2 years ago. Though Eudora eventually found another job, her salary barely covered groceries, so Marigold continued paying the mortgage. Marigold's younger sister, Zinnia, also lived with them. A second-year student at Westfield College, a private institution their parents had somehow afforded, Zinnia and Marigold had always had a strained relationship. Growing up, Zinnia was the favored child who could do no wrong. When Marigold was 10 and received a B+ on a math test, Callum barely acknowledged it, asking why it wasn't an A. That same day, 5-year-old Zinnia brought home a C-, and their parents took her for ice cream as consolation. This pattern persisted into adulthood. Her parents paid Zinnia's tuition at Westfield College, a fact Zinnia frequently mentioned. "How's the community college crowd, Marigold?" she would ask when friends visited. "Must be nice to save all that money on education." Marigold tried ignoring these comments, focusing instead on her busy schedule. Between traveling for outdoor photo shoots and working at her small downtown studio, she was rarely home. She typically arrived late, reheated whatever was in the refrigerator, and collapsed into bed. Despite the hectic pace, she loved watching herself grow professionally with each new project. One early summer evening, Marigold returned around 9 p.m. after an exhausting engagement shoot. The house was unusually quiet. Normally, the television would be blaring with Callum's sports games or Zinnia's reality shows. Instead, Marigold found their dining table set with the fine china, typically reserved for Thanksgiving. "There she is," Callum announced as Marigold entered with her camera bag slung over her shoulder. Eudora, Callum, and Zinnia sat at the table, watching her expectantly. Immediately suspicious, Marigold asked, "What's going on?" as she carefully set down her equipment. "We're celebrating," Eudora beamed. Zinnia finished her sophomore year with a 3.8 GPA. Marigold nodded, trying to recall if they had ever celebrated any of her academic achievements. They hadn't. "That's great," she said flatly. "Congrats, Zinnia." Zinnia smirked. "Thanks, sis." Callum cleared his throat. "We think Zinnia deserves a special gift for working so hard." Marigold tensed. Whenever her parents discussed special gifts for Zinnia, it usually involved Marigold's wallet. Zinnia interjected, unable to contain her excitement. "My friends are going to Florida in 2 weeks for a trip, and I want to go with them." All three stared at Marigold, expectation hanging in the air like a bad smell. They wanted her to pay for it. Of course they did. "No," she said simply. "I'm not paying for your vacation. I have plans for my money. I'm looking to rent a bigger studio for my business." Zinnia's face reddened. Who cares about your stupid photo studio? I need this trip. Everyone's going, and I need to grow my business, Marigold countered. If you want to go to Florida so badly, get a job and pay for it yourself. Eudora gasped as if Marigold had suggested Zinnia sell a kidney. Marigold, how can you be so cruel and selfish? Your sister works hard at school. She deserves this trip. And I work hard every day to support this family, Marigold said, her voice rising. I deserve to invest in my career. Zinnia began shouting that Marigold was ruining her life. Callum shook his head disappointedly, while Eudora continued calling Marigold selfish. Standing up and leaving her plate untouched, Marigold declared, I'm done with this conversation, and walked out as Zinnia's screams followed her upstairs. For days afterwards, tension permeated the household. Zinnia gave Marigold the silent treatment, which was actually a blessing. Eudora and Callum barely grunted, good morning, before ignoring her again. Marigold immersed herself in work, visiting potential new studio spaces across the city. One was too dark, another too small, and a third had water damage in the corner. Finding the perfect space proved more challenging than anticipated. About a week after their dinner confrontation, Marigold returned home around midnight following another disappointing studio viewing. The living room was dark except for the blue television glow, where her parents watched a late-night show. Where's Zinnia? Marigold asked, noticing the unusual quiet. Her parents exchanged glances. After a pause that tightened Marigold's stomach, Callum finally said, his tone deliberately casual, she flew to Florida with her friends this afternoon. Marigold frowned, confused. How did she afford that? Another pause, longer this time. Eudora lifted her chin defiantly. We sold your camera and gave her the money for the trip. The world momentarily stopped spinning. You what? Marigold bolted upstairs, taking the steps two at a time. Her camera was always stored in its case on her desk. Always. Except now. The desk was empty. The camera case was gone. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she tore through her closet, checked under the bed, and rifled through drawers. Nothing. Her $3,500 professional camera, the tool she used to make her living and support this ungrateful family, was gone. She stormed back downstairs, rage building with each step. Are you out of your minds? She shouted, unconcerned about the neighbors. That camera is my livelihood. I use it to earn money, the same money that pays your mortgage. Callum shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. Eudora shrugged. Well, if you had just given Zinnia the money for her trip in the first place, we wouldn't have had to sell it. Marigold stared, dumbfounded by their logic. So this is my fault? You stole from me, and somehow I'm to blame. Don't be so dramatic, Marigold, Callum finally spoke. It's just a camera. You can buy another one. Just a camera. The same camera she'd saved for months to purchase. The same camera that had elevated her work quality and helped her secure larger clients. Marigold looked at her parents, really looked at them, and something inside her broke. These people wouldn't change. They would always prioritize Zinnia. They would always take what was Marigold's and act as if she owed it to them. Without another word, she returned to her room and pulled out her suitcases. She began throwing clothes in, not bothering to fold anything. She grabbed her toiletries from the bathroom, her laptop, and the external hard drives containing years of photography work. Eudora appeared in the doorway. What are you doing? Marigold didn't look at her. What does it look like? I'm leaving. Marigold, you're overreacting. I'm sure Zinnia will bring you back a nice souvenir from Florida. A souvenir, as if that would compensate for stealing her professional equipment. Marigold didn't respond. After packing everything she could fit into her car, she carried the bags downstairs. Her parents followed, their expressions mixing annoyance and disbelief, as if they couldn't comprehend her upset. You'll be back, Callum said as she loaded the last bag into her trunk. This tantrum won't solve anything. Marigold slammed the trunk shut and entered the driver's seat without saying goodbye. In her rearview mirror, she saw them standing in the driveway, arms crossed, waiting for her to change her mind. She drove to her small downtown photo studio, a converted office space with good natural lighting. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She had a small sofa in the corner where she sometimes napped between shoots. Tonight, it would be her bed. Once alone in her studio's quiet, the reality of what had happened hit Marigold like a tidal wave. She collapsed onto the sofa and sobbed deeply, painful sobs racking her entire body. She cried from anger, from betrayal, and from the crushing realization that her own family valued her so little. When her tears were spent, she checked her bank account on her phone. She had approximately $15,000 in savings, money she'd been setting aside for a larger, better studio space. Now that dream would wait. She needed to immediately purchase a new camera or risk losing upcoming jobs. She also needed housing. In the morning, Marigold called her friend Lark. Lark's parents owned a small apartment building near her studio, and she had recently mentioned a vacant unit. "Of course you can have it," Lark said after Marigold explained the situation. "My parents were going to list it next week, but it's yours if you want it. The rent is $1,200 a month." It was more than Marigold wanted to spend, but she needed immediate accommodation. Her next stop was Downtown Camera, the specialty store where she'd purchased her original equipment. The salesman recognized her. "Back so soon, Marigold? Don't tell me something happened to your Canon." She forced a smile. "Long story, but I need the exact same model today, if possible." He whistled. "That's a $3,500 purchase. You sure about this?" "I don't have a choice. I have a wedding shoot this weekend." After buying the new camera, Marigold drove to Lark's building and collected the keys to her new apartment. It was small, a one-bedroom with a combined living/dining area and a kitchenette, but it was clean, bright, and most importantly, hers. She spent the day moving her belongings from the car and setting up essentials. She'd need to buy a bed and furniture, but that could wait. For now, an air mattress would suffice. Throughout the day, her phone continuously lit up with calls and texts from her parents. She finally read one message: "You're being childish. Come home, and we can work this out." Eudora's worried sick. Work this out? There was nothing to resolve. They had stolen from her, plain and simple. Another text from Callum. "This is what adults do, Marigold. They help their family when needed. Grow up and take responsibility." The audacity was astounding. Marigold was the only family member who had taken responsibility, paying their mortgage while they favored her sister. She didn't respond to any messages, instead focusing on settling into her new place and preparing for upcoming shoots. She couldn't afford to lose income now. That evening, an alert appeared on her phone. Zinnia had posted on Instagram. Against better judgment, Marigold opened it. There was her sister, posing on a white sand beach, margarita in hand, wearing designer sunglasses probably costing what Marigold now paid in rent. The caption read, "Best vacation ever. Thanks Mom and Dad for making this trip possible." In that moment, something hardened inside Marigold. She opened her banking app and navigated to the automatic payment section. With a few taps, she canceled the monthly mortgage payment to her parents' lender. Then she blocked all their numbers, including Zinnia's. Let them figure out their own finances for once. Marigold tossed her phone aside and lay back on her air mattress, staring at her new apartment ceiling. For the first time in years, she felt completely alone, but also strangely free. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of work and adjustment to her new life. Marigold immersed herself in photography, scheduling as many shoots as possible to keep occupied. The new apartment still felt temporary. Cardboard boxes stacked in corners, minimal furniture, bare walls, but it was hers. No one could sell her belongings here or make her feel guilty for not bankrolling their lives. She'd managed to avoid thinking about her family by keeping busy, but they weren't making it easy. After she blocked their numbers, they started calling from different phones. She had to answer every unknown number in case it was a potential client, which meant occasionally hearing, "We need to talk." She refused to engage. What was there to discuss? They'd made their choice, and she'd made hers. One Tuesday morning, while editing photos from a maternity shoot, Marigold's phone rang with an unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Marigold, Blackwood Photography." "Marigold." It was her mother's voice, sharp and breathless. "What have you done?" "The bank called." Her voice shook with anger. "They said our mortgage payment is late. That it was declined." "Is that so?" Marigold replied evenly. "You canceled the payments, didn't you? After everything we've done for you." Marigold almost laughed. "Everything you've done for me? Like stealing my camera? Like constantly favoring Zinnia? Like making me feel worthless despite the fact that I've been supporting all of you." "It was just a camera," Eudora practically shouted. "I never thought you'd be so vindictive over something so small." Holding a grudge against her own family. The camera was the last straw. Marigold cut in, surprised by her calmness. "I'm done being used. I'm done being the family ATM while being treated like a second-class citizen in my own home." There was a pause. Then her mother's voice turned pleading. "Marigold, we can't afford the mortgage on our own. Your father's hours got cut back last month, and with Zinnia's tuition." "That's not my problem anymore," Marigold said firmly. "You chose Zinnia over me again. Now you can figure out how to support her without my help." She ended the call and blocked that number too. Her hands were shaking, but she felt oddly liberated. For the first time in her adult life, she had stood up for herself against her family. The next few days passed peacefully. Marigold booked 3 new wedding clients and found a second-hand desk and chair for her apartment. She was slowly building her new life, piece by piece. Then one afternoon, while conducting a portrait session with a local businessman, the studio door burst open. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," said her assistant, Briar. "But there are people insisting on seeing you. They won't leave." Before Marigold could respond, her parents and Zinnia pushed past Briar into the studio. "We need to talk right now," Callum barked, his face flushed red. The businessman looked alarmed. Marigold apologized profusely, promised a discount on his photos, then asked Briar to reschedule him for later that evening. After her client left, Marigold turned to face her family. Zinnia stood slightly behind their parents, arms crossed, glaring at Marigold. She was sporting a deep tan from her Florida trip, the trip that had cost Marigold her camera and ultimately her relationship with her family. "You can't just barge into my workplace," Marigold said, trying to maintain professional composure despite the anger bubbling inside her. "You left us no choice," Eudora snapped. "You blocked our numbers. You won't answer our messages. Because I have nothing to say to you." Callum stepped forward. "Well, we have plenty to say to you, young lady. You need to restart those mortgage payments immediately. We've gotten an extension from the bank, but they won't wait forever." Marigold stared at him in disbelief. "Did you really just come to my place of business to demand money from me?" "It's not demanding," Eudora said. "It's your responsibility to help your family." "My responsibility?" Marigold repeated. Was it Zinnia's responsibility to decline a vacation paid for with stolen property? Was it your responsibility to, I don't know, not steal from your daughter? Zinnia finally spoke up. "Don't be so dramatic. It was just a stupid camera." "That stupid camera was how I made my living," Marigold shot back. "Including paying for the roof over your ungrateful head." Callum's face darkened. "That's enough. I won't be spoken to this way by my own daughter. You will restart those payments." Or what?" Marigold challenged. "Or we'll tell everyone what you've done," Eudora said. "Your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, everyone will know how you abandoned your family when we needed you." "Go ahead," Marigold said, surprised by her own courage. Tell them I stopped financially supporting my family after you stole my professional equipment to fund a beach vacation for my spoiled sister. In fact, if you don't leave my studio right now and stop harassing me, I'll file a police report for the theft of my camera." The color drained from Callum's face. "You wouldn't." "Try me." Marigold pulled out her phone. It was worth over $3,000, which makes it grand theft in this province. I wonder how Zinnia's fancy college would feel about her being involved in a theft case. Her parents stood frozen, the reality of their actions finally sinking in. They had never faced consequences before. Not from her, anyway. "You have 30 seconds to leave before I call the police," Marigold said, holding up her phone. They shuffled backward toward the door, Eudora pulling Zinnia along by the arm. "This isn't over," Callum muttered. But his threat sounded hollow. "It is for me," Marigold replied. That night, Marigold couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the confrontation in her studio, wondering if she had gone too far. But then she remembered how they had invaded her workplace, threatened her, and shown absolutely no remorse for stealing her camera. She remembered Zinnia's Instagram post, her mother's dismissive, "just a camera" comment, and all the years of being treated as less important than her sister. The guilt evaporated. They had made their choices. Now they could live with the consequences. 3 months passed since that confrontation in her studio. Autumn had arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and brilliant foliage that made for stunning outdoor photography sessions. Marigold's business continued to thrive despite the personal turmoil. In fact, without the constant drain of supporting her family, she'd been able to save more aggressively. She hadn't heard directly from her parents or Zinnia since that day. They'd finally stopped trying to contact her after her threat to involve the police. The silence was both a relief and occasionally a hollow ache in quiet moments when she'd remember birthdays celebrated around their dining table or rare peaceful evenings watching movies together. But those moments of nostalgia were brief. The reality of how they treated her always pushed through, reminding her that she'd made the right choice in cutting ties. On a crisp Saturday morning in October, Marigold was at a local coffee shop reviewing client photos when someone slid into the chair across from her. She looked up, startled to see her cousin Sorrel. "Don't worry, I come in peace," she said, holding up her hands. "I just wanted to see how you're doing." Sorrel and Marigold had always been close growing up, but she was also tight with Zinnia. Marigold hadn't spoken to her since moving out. "I'm good," Marigold replied cautiously. "How did you find me?" "Small town. People talk." Sorrel glanced at Marigold's laptop screen. "Business seems good." Marigold nodded, waiting for the real reason behind her visit. Sorrel fidgeted with a sugar packet. "Look, I heard what happened with the camera. That was messed up, what they did to you." This surprised Marigold. "Who told you?" "My parents." "No way." Sorrel shook her head. "They've been telling everyone you abandoned them over a disagreement about family finances. It was Zinnia who cracked. She felt guilty once she found out they sold your camera." Marigold processed this information silently. At least Zinnia had some conscience, however belated. "Anyway," Sorrel continued, "things aren't great at your parents' house. Zinnia took a sabbatical from college and is working at the mall to help with bills. Your parents are both picking up extra shifts. The mortgage situation hit them hard." Marigold waited for guilt to flood in, but it didn't come. Instead, she felt a strange sense of justice. They were finally experiencing the consequences of their actions and learning what responsibility actually meant. "I'm sorry it came to that," she said finally, "but they made their choice." Sorrel nodded slowly. "I'm not here to convince you to help them. Actually, I wanted to tell you that I think you did the right thing. They took advantage of you for years." Her support was unexpected but welcome. They spent the next hour catching up, carefully avoiding further discussion of Marigold's parents. Before leaving, Sorrel mentioned she was getting engaged next spring and wanted Marigold to photograph the event. It was her way of showing solidarity, and Marigold appreciated it. After Sorrel left, Marigold thought about what she'd shared. The image of Zinnia working retail and her parents taking extra shifts was difficult to reconcile with the entitled family who had demanded she fund their lifestyle. Perhaps this hardship would teach them something valuable. 2 weeks later, Marigold signed a lease on a new, larger photography studio downtown. The space had perfect natural lighting, high ceilings, and a small loft area that could serve as a private changing room for clients. It cost nearly double her previous studio rent, but her growing client list justified the expense. On moving day, as she arranged her equipment in the new space, Marigold received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of her old bedroom, now completely transformed into a home office. The message read, "Sold the house, downsizing to an apartment. Thought you should know." She recognized Callum's writing style, terse, factual, devoid of emotion. Marigold didn't respond, but she saved the message. It represented the final chapter of that part of her life. That evening, sitting on the floor of her new studio with takeout containers and a bottle of champagne, Marigold allowed herself to truly celebrate her independence. The journey hadn't been easy, but she'd emerged stronger. Her apartment was starting to feel like home. She'd added personal touches, framed prints of her favorite photographs, plants on every windowsill, a comfortable reading nook by the largest window. For the first time, she was creating a space that reflected only her tastes and needs. Her savings account was growing steadily as well. The dream of owning her own place someday was no longer a distant possibility, but an achievable goal. She'd started researching first-time home buyer programs and setting aside a portion of each payment specifically for a down payment. As she sipped champagne and looked around her new studio, Marigold reflected on everything that had happened. Her parents had always told her that photography wasn't a real career, that she needed something stable, predictable. Yet here she was, thriving on her own terms, while they struggled to adjust to life without her financial support. She didn't wish them ill. Despite everything, they were still her family, and some part of her would always care about them. But she had no regrets about setting boundaries and demanding respect. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their actions. Perhaps someday they might reconnect on more equal terms. Perhaps not. Either way, Marigold was at peace with her decision. The sun began to set, casting golden light across her new studio space. She picked up her camera, the replacement for the one they'd sold, and captured the moment. The resulting image showed long shadows, warm light, and endless possibility. She decided to frame it and hang it in her studio as a reminder of how far she'd come. Hi besties, thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.